I'm Rachel, trapped in a life that feels like a fading photograph, every color drained until all that's left is gray. My suburban home near Chicago is a perfect little cage, but inside, I'm unraveling, drowning in a numbness I can't shake. My husband Ethan sees it. He watches me with quiet, piercing eyes, leaving silent gestures of care that I'm too broken to return. But one morning, everything changed when he packed a bag and told me we're leaving. No explanations, just a command to follow. As we drove into the unknown, a flicker of dread mixed with something I hadn't felt in months: curiosity. What did he have planned in that secluded cabin waiting for us, hidden deep in the whispering pines? And why did I feel like my life was about to shatter in ways I never imagined? Picture this: a gray haze settling over my world, not just in the sky outside my window, but deep in my bones, as if the color has been siphoned out of my very soul. I'm Rachel, 31 years old, tethered to a life in a suburban home just beyond the sprawl of Chicago. My house is a neat little box, all beige siding and manicured shrubs. But inside me, it's a mess of tangled wires, short-circuiting with every breath I take. I'm burned out, emotionally wrung dry, a wilted flower drooping in a vase no one bothers to refill. Each morning, I wake up with a heaviness that pins me to the mattress, my limbs refusing to answer the call of another day. I work as a marketing coordinator, a job that once sparked something in me, but now feels like a slow grind against my nerves. Endless meetings, forced smiles, and shallow chit-chat with colleagues about campaigns and click-through rates. It's all noise, grating, and relentless. Even outside the office, the smallest interactions drain me. A neighbor waving from across the street, asking about my day, or a friend texting to catch up over coffee. I can barely muster a response without feeling like I'm performing in a play I never auditioned for. I just want to retreat, to curl into myself and let the world spin on without me. Then there's Ethan, my husband. He's 34, a software engineer with a quiet, steady presence that feels like an anchor in my storm. Where I'm a mess of jagged edges, he's smooth stone, calm and unyielding. He doesn't prod or push me to spill my thoughts, doesn't try to patch me up with empty words. Instead, he watches, his dark eyes tracking my slow unraveling with a patience that both comforts and unnerves me. Every morning, without fail, I find a mug of chamomile tea waiting on the kitchen table, steam curling up like a silent offering. He never mentions it, never expects a thank you, just leaves it there. A small gesture that says he sees me even when I can't see myself. There are moments, though, where the weight of my silence presses down on us both. I remember one morning, not long ago, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling as if the cracks in the plaster might spell out some kind of answer. I couldn't move, couldn't even think about dragging myself upright. Ethan was there, perched on the edge of the mattress, his hand resting lightly on my arm. Not gripping, not demanding, just there, warm and still. He didn't say a word, and neither did I. The silence between us wasn't empty, though. It was thick, heavy with unspoken things, but not judgmental. It was as if he was waiting for me to find my way back, even if I didn't know where I was supposed to go. Time has become a strange, sluggish thing lately. Weeks bleed into each other, indistinguishable, like watercolor paint running together on a soaked canvas, blurring the lines between days and weeks. And then, one morning, everything shifted in a way I hadn't expected. I woke up to the faint sound of movement, my eyes peeling open against the weight of exhaustion. There was Ethan, standing by the side of the bed, already dressed in a dark jacket and jeans, his boots scuffed but laced tight. At his feet sat a small duffel bag, zipped up and ready, like it had been waiting for this moment longer than I had. I blinked up at him, my mind sluggish, trying to piece together what was happening. His face was set, determined, but his voice came out soft, almost tender, as he looked down at me. "We're going. I've arranged everything. You just need to be." I didn't even have the strength to question him. Where were we going? Why now? The words sat heavy on my tongue, but they never made it out. I just lay there for a moment, the familiar ache in my chest spreading like fog, clouding any curiosity I might have once had. With a groan, I dragged myself upright, my body protesting every movement as if it were wading through molasses. I didn't ask for details. I didn't care enough to. I just moved on autopilot, pulling on a sweater and jeans, my hair a tangled mess I didn't bother to fix. Ethan didn't rush me, but there was a quiet urgency in the way he watched, like he knew we couldn't linger. We stepped outside into the gray dawn, the air biting at my skin as I slid into the passenger seat of our old Subaru. Ethan took the wheel, the engine humming to life with a familiar rumble that felt like the only steady thing in that moment. I stared out the window as we pulled away from our neat little suburban box, watching the city fade into streaks of concrete and glass in the side mirror. The morning light was dull, filtering through a sky that looked as tired as I felt, casting long shadows over the empty roads. We drove in silence, the kind that wasn't uncomfortable, but wasn't comforting either. Just there, like a third passenger between us. My mind wandered as the miles stretched on. Was this some kind of intervention? Had Ethan finally had enough of watching me unravel, piece by jagged piece, and decided to take matters into his own hands? Or was this a last, desperate attempt to stitch together the fraying edges of our marriage, to find something worth salvaging in the wreckage I'd become? I didn't voice any of it. I couldn't. The thoughts churned in my head, heavy and unspoken, while the hum of the tires on the asphalt became a kind of lullaby, dulling the sharp edges of my worry. I leaned my head against the cool glass, letting the vibration of the car seep into me, wondering if I'd ever feel anything beyond this numbness. Hours passed, how many I couldn't say, before the landscape shifted. The endless sprawl of highways gave way to winding roads flanked by towering pines, their needles brushing against a sky that seemed to hold its breath, heavy with the promise of something unspoken. I'm still Rachel, still lost in the fog of my own mind. But as we pulled up to a secluded cabin nestled deep in those pine woods, a flicker of unease stirred in my chest. The place was rustic, all weathered logs and a sagging porch, with smoke curling lazily from a stone chimney. Ethan cut the engine, the silence of the forest pressing in around us, and for the first time in hours, I felt a prickle of awareness, like I was waking up to something I couldn't yet name. We stepped out, the crunch of gravel underfoot sharp against the stillness, and Ethan led the way inside without a word. The air in the cabin was warm, tinged with the scent of wood smoke and something earthy, grounding. I trailed behind him, my boots scuffing against the worn floorboards, my mind still sluggish but starting to turn over questions I hadn't dared ask on the drive. What were we doing here? Why this place, so far from everything familiar? But before I could form the words, I stepped into the living room and froze, my breath catching in my throat. There were 3 men already there, lounging as if they owned the space, as if they'd been waiting for us all along. My eyes darted between them, taking in every detail with a sudden, jarring clarity. The first, Caleb, was a rugged man in his late 30s, his scruffy beard framing a hard jaw, his intense green eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that made my skin prickle. Then there was Marcus, lean and quiet, in his early 40s, his reserved demeanor almost a shield, his gaze steady but unreadable as he leaned against the wall. And finally, Julian, younger, maybe 28, with a disarming smile and an easy confidence that seemed to fill the room, his posture relaxed on the couch like he belonged there. I stood rooted to the spot, confusion and discomfort coiling tight in my gut. Who were these people? Why were they here, in this remote cabin, looking at me like they knew something I didn't? I turned to Ethan, my eyes wide, searching his face for some kind of explanation, some reassurance. He met my gaze, his expression unreadable, and gave a small, almost imperceptible nod, as if to say everything was under control. Then, with a subtle gesture, he motioned for me to sit near the fire, the crackling flames casting flickering shadows across the room. I hesitated, my body tense, every muscle coiled like a spring ready to snap. But I moved anyway, lowering myself onto the edge of a worn armchair, the heat of the fire doing little to ease the chill that had settled into my bones. The air felt thick, heavy with something I couldn't name, and my heart thudded unevenly as Caleb approached me first. His movements were slow, deliberate, like a predator sizing up its territory, but there was no malice in his eyes, only a strange, quiet curiosity. He stopped just in front of me, close enough that I could smell the faint scent of pine and leather on him, and reached out. His fingers brushed a stray strand of my hair, tucking it behind my ear with a gentleness that didn't match the roughness of his appearance. Then, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, he brushed an imaginary speck of dust off my shoulder, his touch lingering just a moment too long. It was such a simple gesture, so mundane on the surface, but it sent a jolt through me, electric and unexpected, waking up parts of me I thought had gone dormant long ago. I didn't pull away. I couldn't. My breath hitched, and I was hyper-aware of Ethan watching from an armchair across the room, his posture relaxed, his face calm, almost approving. What was that look in his eyes? Was it encouragement, or something deeper, something I wasn't ready to face? My mind spun, but beneath the confusion, something else stirred inside me, a flicker of something I hadn't felt in months, desire, curiosity, life. It was as if a match had been struck in the dark, casting light on corners of my mind that had been shrouded in darkness. As the initial shock of meeting Caleb, Marcus, and Julian settled into a strange, buzzing tension, the hours that followed felt like wading through a dream I couldn't quite grasp. The cabin, with its creaking floorboards and the faint scent of pine seeping through the walls, became a world of its own, separate from everything I'd known. I sat there by the fire for a while, the warmth licking at my skin, but it couldn't touch the cold knot of uncertainty inside me. The dynamic in the house was unlike anything I'd ever felt. There was an undercurrent, a silent pulse that seemed to connect us all, even as I struggled to understand it. Caleb broke the quiet first, his presence still as commanding as when he'd approached me earlier. He came over with a glass of water, the condensation dripping down the side, and handed it to me with a small, knowing look in those piercing green eyes. His fingers brushed mine as I took it, lingering just a heartbeat longer than necessary, sending a shiver up my arm that I couldn't ignore. It wasn't just a touch. It was a question, a quiet invitation that hung in the air between us. I mumbled a thanks, my voice barely above a whisper, and he nodded, stepping back, but never fully taking his gaze off me. My skin felt too tight, too aware, as I sipped the water, trying to anchor myself in the mundane act. Marcus was next, his quieter demeanor a stark contrast to Caleb's intensity. He sat down on the arm of a nearby chair, his posture casual, but his eyes sharp, watching me with a kind of gentle scrutiny. His voice was low, almost soothing, as he started talking about the forest trails surrounding the cabin. "There's a path out back that winds through the oldest pines," he said, his words slow and deliberate, like he was painting a picture just for me. "It's quiet out there, peaceful, You can hear your own thoughts if you listen close enough." I nodded, clinging to the softness of his tone, letting it ease the jagged edges of my nerves. It felt like he was offering me a lifeline, a way to breathe amidst the storm brewing inside me, and for a moment, I let myself imagine walking those trails, escaping into the stillness he described. Then there was Julian, whose energy seemed to light up the dim corners of the room. He sprawled on the couch across from me, tossing a playful grin my way as he launched into a story about some misadventure he'd had in these woods years ago. His laughter was infectious, a bright, unguarded sound that cut through the heaviness in my chest. For the first time in what felt like forever, I found myself laughing too, a small, rusty sound that surprised even me. It was fleeting, but it was real, a crack in the wall I'd built around myself. Julian's eyes sparkled with mischief as he leaned forward, his voice dropping conspiratorially. "Stick with me, and I'll show you all the hidden spots around here," he teased, and I couldn't help but smile, even as my mind wrestled with the weight of everything else. But beneath these small, seemingly innocent interactions, there was Ethan. Always Ethan. He lingered in the background, a silent shadow in the room, his dark eyes tracking every move, every word, every fleeting touch. He didn't speak much, didn't join in the banter or the stories, but his presence was a constant pressure, a reminder of the unspoken questions that had followed us here. I could feel his gaze like a physical thing, heavy and unyielding, and it stirred a storm of conflicting emotions in me. Part of me wanted to sink into the warmth of these new connections, to let Caleb's lingering touches, Marcus's quiet words, and Julian's easy laughter pull me out of the fog I'd been lost in. But another part of me was tethered to Ethan, to the history we shared, to the silent promises and pains that bound us. I felt torn, caught between the comfort of the unfamiliar and the weight of the known. Later, as the evening deepened, I found myself stepping outside onto the porch with Ethan, needing air, needing answers. The night was cold, the kind. As the night deepened in that secluded cabin, the air seemed to thicken with a tension that had been building since the moment we arrived. I stood on the porch for a while, with Ethan, the cold biting at my skin. But the real storm was inside me, churning with questions I couldn't voice. When we stepped back into the warmth of the living room, the flickering firelight cast long shadows across the faces of Caleb, Marcus, and Julian. Their presence felt like a magnet, pulling at something deep within me, something I'd buried under layers of numbness for far too long. I could feel it now, stirring, awakening, and I knew this moment was inevitable, a turning point I couldn't turn back from. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding like a drum in my chest, and made a choice. I let go. All the restraint, all the walls I'd built to keep myself contained, crumbled in an instant. I allowed myself to be seen, to be touched, to feel the rush of being truly alive again. Caleb was the first to approach, his rough hands warm as they brushed against my arm, guiding me with a tenderness that belied his rugged exterior. The sensation was electric, a spark that ignited every nerve in my body. Marcus followed, his touch lighter but no less potent, his fingers tracing a path along my shoulder that sent shivers cascading down my spine. Julian, with his easy confidence, joined in, his hands steady and sure, a grounding force as I surrendered to the moment. The air was heavy with the scent of pine and the faint musk of exertion, a raw, earthy blend that grounded me even as my mind spun. Their voices, low and encouraging, wove around me like a cocoon. Caleb's gravelly tone murmured words of reassurance, urging me to let go of my doubts. Marcus's softer timbre offered quiet strength, a reminder that I was safe here. Julian's playful edge cut through the intensity, his whispers laced with a warmth that made my chest ache with something I hadn't felt in ages: connection. Their words weren't just sounds, they were lifelines, pulling me out of the shell I'd retreated into, coaxing me back into the world with every gentle syllable. And there, in the midst of it all, was Ethan. I turned my gaze to him, my breath catching as I saw him standing across the room, a glass of deep red wine in his hand, the firelight reflecting in the liquid like a mirror of the heat I felt. His eyes locked onto mine, and I braced myself for anger, for hurt, for some sign of betrayal. But there was none. Instead, there was a quiet intensity, a look so piercing it felt like he could see straight through to the core of me. It wasn't judgment I saw there. It was something else, something profound, as if he were witnessing my rebirth, as if he'd been waiting for this very moment to see me come alive again. What unfolded wasn't hidden or secretive. It was open, shared. A moment of raw honesty that defied everything I thought I knew about guilt or shame. I felt no remorse, no weight of wrongdoing. Instead, there was a rush, a surge of vitality that coursed through me like wildfire, burning away the gray haze that had smothered me for so long. Every touch, every whispered word, every shared glance with Ethan, it was like rediscovering a part of myself I thought was lost forever. My skin felt alive under their hands. My heart raced with a rhythm I'd forgotten. And for the first time in months, I wasn't just existing. I was living, fully and unapologetically. As the intensity of the moment deepened, I couldn't tear my eyes away from Ethan. His gaze never wavered, and in it, I saw something shift. A realization that struck me like lightning. This wasn't just happening with his permission. This was his design. He had orchestrated this, not out of malice or indifference, but out of a desperate need to see me whole again, to rekindle the fire he knew still flickered somewhere inside me. And more than that, I saw that this wasn't just for me. It was for us. A shared awakening. A bridge to something new between us. I woke up the next morning in the wooden house. The faint creak of the floorboards beneath me pulling me from a sleep that felt deeper than any I'd had in months. The air was cool, tinged with the lingering scent of last night's fire, and as I blinked my eyes open, I saw the forest outside the window bathed in the soft golden glow of dawn. The towering pines stood like silent sentinels, their branches swaying gently in a breeze I couldn't hear from inside. I shifted under the heavy quilt, my body still humming with the echoes of everything that had transpired, a quiet energy coursing through me that I hadn't felt in so long. The room was empty, eerily so. Caleb, Marcus, and Julian were gone, their presence erased as if they'd never been here at all. No trace of their voices, their laughter, or the weight of their gazes remained. Just the stillness of the cabin and the faint rustle of leaves beyond the glass. I sat up slowly, my mind replaying fragments of the night before, the intensity of it all still vivid, like a painting etched into my memory. My heart felt fuller, heavier, but not in the suffocating way it had for months. It was a different kind of weight, one that grounded me, that reminded me I was alive. I pulled on a sweater, the fabric rough against my skin, and padded barefoot across the cold floor toward the living room. That's where I found Ethan, sitting by the fireplace, the embers still glowing faintly, casting a warm, flickering light across his face. He looked up as I approached, his dark eyes softening in a way that made my chest tighten. Without a word, he held out a chipped mug of coffee, steam curling up from the dark liquid, and I took it, our fingers brushing in a fleeting, familiar touch. We settled together on the worn couch, wrapped in the same plaid blanket, the edges frayed from years of use. The warmth of the fabric and the heat of Ethan's body beside me felt like a cocoon, shielding us from the world outside. I sipped the coffee, bitter and strong, letting it ground me as I stared into the dying fire. The silence between us wasn't heavy like it used to be. It was softer now, a shared space where words didn't need to rush in to fill the gaps. I thought about the whisper he'd let slip last night, in the quiet aftermath of everything, when the cabin had grown still and it was just the two of us. His voice had been low, almost a breath, carrying a question and a promise all at once. Now, in the light of morning, I felt ready to answer. I turned to him, my voice steady despite the flutter in my chest. Next time, more. As long as you're there. The words hung between us, simple, but loaded with everything I couldn't yet say. I saw his eyes flicker with something. Ascending surprise, maybe relief, or a quiet understanding. I meant it, every syllable. I wasn't just talking about another night like the one we'd shared. I was speaking to something deeper. A commitment to explore this new side of us. This raw, uncharted territory that had opened up between Ethan and me. I wanted to chase that feeling of aliveness, that electric surge that had burned through the gray haze of my life, but only with him as my anchor. I knew I couldn't do this without him, without the steady strength of his presence, the way he'd watched over me, not just last night, but through every dark moment that had led us here. He was my safe harbor, the one who'd seen me at my lowest and still believed there was fire left in me to rekindle. Ethan didn't respond right away. He just looked at me, his gaze searching, as if he were weighing my words, feeling their shape and weight. Then, slowly, the corner of his mouth lifted. Not quite a smile, but something close, something that told me he understood. He reached for my hand under the blanket, his fingers intertwining with mine, warm and firm. That small gesture was enough, an unspoken agreement, a tether between us that felt stronger now than, don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment if you enjoyed this story. This will help us create more engaging stories for you.